In terms of human consciousness, I mean, there's so much debate in the field and so much we could talk about. But I'll tell you my particular position on that, if you like.
I would love to hear it.
So, well, I guess we should go back to something you mentioned earlier, which is the work I did for my graduate thesis on split brain patients. Yep. Now, split brain patients are people in whom the two halves of the two hemispheres are sectioned, the connections between them are sectioned to relieve intractable epilepsy. This is not something that you do lightly, obviously, because you're disconnecting one hemisphere from the other. But it seemed, in the 1970s when we were doing these studies, I mean, we weren't doing these surgeries, obviously. There was a surgeon at Dartmouth that was doing it, and there was a surgeon in Southern California that had done it in the 60s. And my mentor, Mike Zanica, worked on those patients in the 60s when he was at Caltech as a graduate student. So it was only 10 or so years after that I joined him. So he wasn't that much older than me. So we got along quite well. So we were studying these patients not to understand their epilepsy, but to understand what goes on in the mind when the brain is split. Now, a lot of that Mike had done, he worked out the details of the basics of what happens when the brain is split. So if you show a picture to the left side of visual space, it goes to the right hemisphere. If you show a picture on the right side, it goes to the left hemisphere. So when you put information, for example, if I flashed information into your left visual field, it would go to your right hemisphere, and I would say, what did you see? You would say, oh, I saw an apple. Okay, if that's what I showed you. A split brain patient, when you put information on the left side of space, it goes to the right visual field. I'm sorry, it goes to the right hemisphere, but the left hemisphere can't talk about it. Left hemisphere is where you speak, right? Yeah. But it has no access to what that right hemisphere is holding, what information it has. But the right hemisphere can, using the left hand, pick up the apple and say, this is it. I mean, he doesn't say it, he shows it, points to it, Yeah. And then the left hemisphere can say, oh, yeah, I knew what that was, and kind of make up a story. And that was a key thing in our experiments. The way that these patients made up stories to compensate for the fact that the right hemisphere has information that the left hemisphere doesn't. And so the left hemisphere, we know, has a active conscious mind because it's talking to you and keeping up with the conversation, knows what happened in the past, has predictions of the future and all of that. But we don't know about the right hemisphere, what's going on over there. And so we were very curious about these kind of confabulations that the left hemisphere would generate in the faced with having just produced a behavior. So we designed some experiments to kind of test this. I mean, in this one patient that we were studying, his initials were PS, patients always get a name like that. His name was PS. And we had the opportunity for the first time to ask an important question, which is the right hemisphere conscious? When you can only use pointing to things as, as the indicator. Yeah. You can't really say much because you don't know if there's like a smart chimpanzee over there or if there's really a human being. Yeah. But we had this one patient, PS, who could both read and talk in the left hemisphere, as all the patients could. But in addition, he could read in the right hemisphere. That was very unusual. He couldn't talk out of the right hemisphere, but he could read. So this, for the first time, we could probe whether there was a person over there by asking it verbal questions. So we put in, who are you, in the left visual field, goes to the right hemisphere, and he spells Paul with his left hand. So it's going over there, and it's able to answer by spelling it out with Scrabble letters. We just list, it'd be like Scrabble letters. He pulls them out, P-A-U-L. And that was kind of chilling. It was like spine tingling because here was a part of the brain that normally could not communicate with you in any kind of human sense. But he knew who he was. He knew his name, Paul. He also had he had social relationships. If you asked him who his favorite person was, he said the Fonz from Happy Days. who asked him who his girlfriend was, he spelled out Liz, L-I-Z, his girlfriend's name, and on like that. So he had a sense of self. He had a social sense. And when we asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, the right hemisphere said he wanted to be an automobile racer, auto racer. But the left hemisphere in conversation would always tell us he wanted to be a draftsman. So two different, same person really in many ways, but two different views of the future. I mean, that's fascinating, right? Now, how much, weight can we put on this? So we got one patient and he's doing some really cool stuff, telling us some really important things. But, it's hard to know whether, how far to take this. But it was so clear in him. It's not like you need it's not like you needed a statistical test to see these kinds of things. These were not like, a group of patients. It was like, you could see that this is really what was going on. Obviously, the right hemisphere could read. Yep. And because he could read, he could generate these very complicated, important kinds of indications that he was conscious. So the kind of the coup de grace test that we did, we presented two pictures simultaneously, one to the left and one to the right. In the left hemisphere, in the left visual field going to the right hemisphere, was a snow scene, snow, car covered in snow and stuff. Yeah. The right visual field going to the left hemisphere was a chicken, or chicken claw. Sorry, okay. Chicken claw. And so then the left hand goes to a shovel, and the right hand goes to a chicken. So we said, why did you do that? Now we're talking to the right hemisphere. I'm sorry, we're talking to the left hemisphere. So we said, why did you do that? And we're talking to the left hemisphere at this point. Yep. And so he says, well, I saw a chicken claw, so I pointed to the chicken, and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed. So he observed the behavior of his left hand and came up with a story to make his left hand and right hand choices fit together in a seamless narration. There wasn't a split second of thought. It was simply when we said, why did you do that? He said, well, I saw the chicken claw, so I pointed to the chicken and need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed. So the instant thing, at first we thought, well, this is again confabulation. But, and neurological patients often confabulate to take care of their problems or to compensate for their problems. But, so what? What we concluded, we'd go to the bar every night in Vermont after we were testing the patients and drink a little Jack Daniels and kind of speculate about what was going on. At first we were thinking about, confabulation. Then the light bulb goes off. No, this is not just something we see in patients because of their brain damage and brain surgery. It's something we do every day, all the time. Mm-hmm. We make up stories to make sense of who we are, of what we're doing. And the basic idea was so Mike was a good friend with Leon Festinger, who had come up with the idea of cognitive dissonance in the 1950s, late 50s. And so, he borrowed from these social psychologists like Festinger very freely, of course, crediting them. But, not many neuroscience researchers at the time were thinking about social psychology, but Mike was always ahead of the curve. So he said, maybe what's going on here is that, we have all these systems in our brain that are capable of producing behavior unconsciously. And it's, because we all believe we have free will, regardless of what scientists think, most people, including me, think we have free will of some kind. So if we're going to protect that sense of free will, we have to somehow get past the fact that we aren't always controlling what we do. So if you are behaving in a way that is inconsistent with what your conscious mind thinks is going on, it makes sense that there's got to be some kind of dissonance reducing narration that makes it all make sense.